Hey, well, welcome everybody. Let's make a start. It's great to have you here with us. So thanks very much for your time. I'm Jane McLennan. I'm going to be one of your presenters today. I dairy farm in Greytown. I've been working in Farm Focus for about 6 months, but I've been a user of the Farm Focus app for nearly 2 years. I'm passionate about the dairy industry. I love enabling people, and Farm Focus is a tool that enables farmers and puts them in the driver's seat. So I'm really excited to be here today with you. Abby.
And I'm Abby Fairbrother. I'm a sheep and beef farmer from just outside of Marsden out towards the coast. I've been with Farm Focus for about 7 years now. Started off on the phones and now I'm in a training and development role. But I also use Focus and the programs before that for about 15 years on our own farm. So we'll get into it.
Today's webinar is all about preparation for the end of the financial year. It will be about 40 minutes and there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end. So the aim of the session today is that you will have a clear checklist to make the end of year transfer to your accountant seamless. So why is the year-end processing so important? Well, you want to ensure everything is completed correctly to help the financial year-end process run smoothly and to start your new year in the correct position. The more you can do, the cheaper your accountant's fee is going to be. Every time they contact you, it costs you money. The more knowledge you have on your own business means better controls, which enables better conversations with your accountant and other trusted advisors. Good data means more accurate reports. Your monthly coding feeds into your reports, so it's important that you get this information right and are consistent. Remember, plan as you code, code as you plan. But the beauty about Farm Focus is the data is already there for some really great reports. So now what I'd like to do is move into the demonstration data. Today, we're going to be using the Dairy Demo database. So let's kick off with a bit of housekeeping. First thing we should really do is we should check your accountant is invited into your Farm Focus file with organisation admin access. To do that, you go into settings, users, and you add a user. Now, while we're in settings, let's have a quick look at some other information that is useful. Settings, codes, farm codes. The code list is the backbone of your data, impacting on how your cash flow comes together and the format of your reports. We haven't got time to drill into this today, but we recommend you do a health check of your code list. You're able to deactivate codes that you don't use, change the order of codes, and add new codes to customize your database. And here, now let's look at settings, farm business. Here, you have to, we recommend you enter your hectares of your farm, as this feeds into your management reports. Settings, bank accounts. In here, please include your overdraft limit and your overdraft interest rate. That's if you want Farm Focus to alert you to the fact that you might be exceeding your overdraft in the current month, and also for Farm Focus to calculate your overdraft interest within the working plan. Settings, production. For dairy farmers, please enter your annual kilograms of milk solids, as this feeds into the calculation for your break-even milk price, which is displayed on your dashboard. This is really important metric. Enter your livestock values. You can find these on the Dairy NZ website or look at our demo database for standard numbers. You don't really need to worry about your livestock weights. It's more for sheep and beef, but feel free to add those as well. So as I prepare for the end of the financial year, there are 5 questions I like to ask myself. The first question I ask is, are my income and expenses in the correct financial year? Oh, before we make a start in this, we know that the majority of dairy farmers' end of financial year is the 31st of May. But for the purposes of today's demonstration, we're going to use the end of the financial year as the 31st of March. This allows us to demonstrate the end of year process for you so that you're ahead of the game come the 31st of May. Now, with all farming businesses, we generally pay for a service the month following the actual event. So on our farm, dry cow is undertaken in May, yet I pay for it in June. This event crosses between financial years and should be an expense in the year it happened and not the year it was paid. To ensure items are in the correct financial year, the invoice date needs to be allocated to the correct financial year. So it's all about the invoice date. It's the invoice date that dictates what financial year a service belongs. Now, if you use the invoice scanner, connectors, or upload CSV files, Farm Focus will pick up the invoice date and automatically populate it to the correct financial year. If you don't use these tools, and we highly recommend that you do, please check the invoice date is in the correct financial year. And now Abby here is going to demonstrate with Nice Neighbour.
So as you can see here, the invoice date and the due date for this invoice sit at the same time. This is highly unlikely because it's a lease payment that potentially happened for last month. So what we need to do is change this invoice date to be relevant to the financial year. As Jane said earlier, we're using the 31st of March. So this invoice date needs to sit within March. So I'll just simply come in here and change the invoice date to a March date. And that is now, although it's paid in April, is now relevant to this financial year. It's as simple as that.
Your livestock sales and purchases have the correct event date for the current financial year.
So as you can see here, this is not, the money is not coming into the account until the 25th of April. However, it is the event date which drives which financial year this sits in. This is in March, so it will sit in our previous financial year.
In the completed page, go through your bank transactions in the month post or several months post your end of financial year. Some bank transactions will have the wrong financial year associated with them. This can happen when the transaction is not matched to an invoice. Now go through and ensure the expenses is in the year it happened and not in the year it was paid.
Really important here to make sure that you're in the transaction area here. As you'll see, you can see the invoice date, and it's very simple. If you don't have it matched to a corresponding invoice, if it's just a bank transaction, once it's in the completed screen and you need to change it to that financial year, simply click on the 3 dots and add invoice date. If I was then select a March invoice date, and that will then allocate that to the previous financial year.
So it's as simple as that. Now so the first question I've asked myself are my invoices and transactions in the correct financial year? The second question I have to ask myself is the needs action screen up to date? Now this is our needs action screen, and in here I look at 3 things. Number 1, I check that there are no unpaid invoices for the completed financial year still sitting in the needs action screen. I double check for what I call rogue invoices, and these are invoices left from previous months. They can be really, really old, and they are still sitting in the needs action page. And the third thing that I like to check is I like to go to the bank transaction side of my needs action page, and I check there are no transactions from the completed financial year waiting to be matched or coded. And if there are, I match and code them so they move to the completed screen. And Abby's going to demonstrate the Trucking Limited invoice here.
So as you can see here, I've just sorted by using this tab up here to show the oldest invoices first. I can see I've got a trucking invoice here for spreading and a corresponding one that I need to match to. So if I go into my matching page and I find my trucking one, I can then match the 2 accordingly.
And Farm Focus with the matching, the relevant invoice comes to the top to make it easy for you to find.
that's now cleared out that rogue, that transaction that was from the previous financial year.
So now I'd like to make a special mention of the rogue invoices. It's really important that at the end of the financial year, you've got no rogue invoices. These are invoices that have been paid but are still sitting in your needs action screen, and sometimes they are months old. They have not been matched with a payment made or money received. Basically, they're sitting in no man's land. And it's really important to deal with these invoices, as they will be double counted by your accountant and when processing your end of year accounts. They've been paid, so they've been counted once, but because the invoice continues to sit in the needs action screen, it will flow through to your accountant's closing accounts receivable or payment report, so it's counted twice. So any invoice, rogue or otherwise, left in your needs action screen from last financial year requires further investigation. For example, I've got this Dog Food Limited invoice here back from January. It's still sitting in my needs action screen, so I need to investigate it. The first thing I do is I check whether the invoice has been paid or money received. To do that, I go to the completed page and I search for the invoice. Look, here it is, the dog food invoice back from January. Transaction has been coded and it is sitting in my my completed screen. So what does this mean? Well, it means the invoice was paid, but I coded the bank transaction rather than matching it back to my invoice on my needs action screen. So what do I do now? Well, there are various scenarios. The first scenario is if the transaction has not been locked into a final GST return, i.e. the GS return has not been filed with the IRD, simply click on the completed transaction.
It's very simple. First of all, don't forget to use this handy search tool. So we've got the trucking one here, which has actually been matched, but has been matched incorrectly in this scenario. So we view the transaction and we can unmatch it from here and save, and both the invoice and the transaction will go back to the needs action screen. In the case of the dog food one, for example, just to give you another one, we can see that that January one is sitting here. What I would do is literally view the transaction, delete the lines and save, and it will take it back to the ready to be matched with the corresponding transaction, if the corresponding invoice if necessary. Otherwise, there's another scenario that we can look at as well.
So if the transaction has been locked in a final GST return, i.e. the GS return has been filed with the IRD, then how we approach this differs from whether we are payment basis for GST or invoice basis for GST. Now, I'm only going to cover what we do if we are payment basis for GST, as the majority of our clients are payment basis. Now, is anyone here invoice basis for GST? Because if you are invoice basis for GST and have some of these rogue old invoices still sitting on your needs action screen, please call your trusted support team on 0800 888 080, as there are a few additional steps you need to do. But it's really important that these old invoices are removed before you send your end of financial year accounts to your accountant, as we don't want any double counting. So what we're going to do is work through the example of a payment basis. So what are my options? Basically, the invoice needs to be deleted from the needs action screen. We need to delete the invoice from the needs action screen, but if we've got a PDF copy of that invoice, we want to attach it to the transaction in the completed page, i.e. we're moving it from the needs action screen to the completed page.
So I'll just demonstrate that now. I'll go back into the actual and find that rogue invoice. Within here, it does have a PDF attachment. So I'd simply open this up, open the attachment. I will download it onto my computer, save it in there. And then what I will do is I'll go back into Focus and actually go out of the invoice. I can now delete this invoice using the 3 dots. And now I want to attach it to the completed bank transaction. So luckily I've got mine all sorted for me because it's remembered, but if I didn't, I'd come in here, search again for dog food. I know it's the one in January, so I'll click in here and just simply attach that invoice. So it's all tidy and we've got the corresponding invoice, and don't forget to save. Voila. We've got rid of the rogue invoice, but we've also now got the attachment with it.
So if you go back into the January one, you can see how it's at the top there. It's showing that there is attachment. So the invoice, we know the invoice is sitting in there, and we can open it up and go back to it at any time. So to summarise, if I have a bank transaction from the previous financial year left in my needs action screen, I code that transaction so it moves to my completed screen. If I have an invoice from previous financial years left in my needs action screen, I need to deal with those as well. So if I'm payment basis, I simply have to remove the invoice from the needs action screen and attach it to my completed screen. That's if I want to keep the PDF copy of the invoice. Otherwise, I can just simply delete it, although that's not recommended. And secondly, if I'm invoice basis for GST, I need to ring the help centre because there's a few extra steps that are required, and due to time constraints, we won't be doing that today. But most importantly, before you send your account to your accountant, double check there are no invoices or bank transactions for last financial year sitting on your needs action page. So the third question I like to ask myself is your bank account balanced? You need to make sure your bank balance and Farm Focus balance match for the last day of the financial year. Let's have a quick overview of the balancing screen. The green line shows where we're balanced to. So where we're balanced to.
So we're balanced the 15th because we've got a trucking one that needs to be coded because we brought it back earlier. But I might quickly go in there and just balance that up to show you what happens.
So you should be balanced if you're using bank feeds, assuming that all your transactions have been coded. Now, is anyone here not using bank feeds? Because if you're not, could you let me know through the chat bubble, please, so we can cover it in the question and answer sessions. Because having bank feeds set up is probably one of the most important things to make the automation of Farm Focus work and get the most out of Farm Focus. It ensures accuracy of data and it's time saving. So now we can see we're balanced now up to the 31st of March. We've got that green line there. If you don't balance, it's most likely due to an uncoded transaction to complete, which is what our case was, what Abby completed. If you can't find any uncoded transactions, then have a quick look in the deleted items to see if some transactions have been deleted by mistake. For more information, you can always go to our help centre and read some of our articles. And if you've still got issues, please feel free to call our help centre. But I can't emphasise enough, if you are using bank feeds, you should always be balanced. Question 4, do I need to correct any coding? For this step, we go back into the completed screen. And I look for 2 types of mistakes. First of all, number 1 for inconsistent coding, and number 2 for incorrect GST type. So let's look at the inconsistent coding. I ask myself, have I coded items correctly? Now, providing I don't change the GST type from business to personal or personal to business, I can change my codes as long as it's not impacting on my GST. You can change your codes directly in the coded lines without having to drill into it. For example, for the weed spraying invoice here, when I went and reviewed my codes, I established that I'd originally coded my my spraying under weeds and pests contracting, but then I remembered that it was actually related to pasture renewal costs. So it should have been coded under pasture renewal spraying. So I can just simply go into my coded lines and change my codes there and then. Too easy. And now it's just, now you'll find the code sits under pasture renewal spraying.
I've just sorted this according to the code list to make it easier. So all the codes are in order. So if you are searching for something, you can use the search tool, or if you want to get everything in order to check their consistency of coding, use here just to show the coding in order. Great little trip.
So the other thing I check for is incorrect GST types. So if you have any GST discrepancies, i.e. an item that has been locked into a GST return and it has been filed with the IRD, and you want to change it from business GST type to personal GST type, or vice versa, you can still do this by way of reversal transactions or journal entries. Now, can you let us know in the chat box if you'd like us to demonstrate this, and we can do it in the Q&A session if we've got time. Now, my final question that I need to ask myself are my coding livestock tallies correct? To do this, I go into my livestock tab within my working plan. Livestock tallies do matter, so be careful that the stock transactions, your sales and purchases, have been coded correctly, and non-financial events during the year, e.g. births, deaths and missings, have been recorded. Now, we may think that the stock rec is more important for sheep and beef farmers, but it is also extremely important that dairy farmers have an accurate stock record. So let's have a quick tour of the livestock tab. Now, it shows you your livestock numbers over the financial year. You've got your opening numbers on your left and your closing stock numbers or tallies on your right. And for each stock class, I have my births, deaths and missings for each stock class. Now, what you need to do is check your opening numbers reconcile to what your accountant finished with last year. To do that, I actually go to my financial accounts from my accountant last year and I have a look, because you've got to remember that closing numbers from last year should equal opening numbers for this year. Once I've done that and I'm happy with my opening numbers, I look along the spreadsheet and check that you've recorded all non-financial transactions like births, deaths and missing. Now, I do this methodically, looking at a stock class at a time and then moving to the next. And I ask myself the basic questions like, are they reasonable? Abby, can you demonstrate how we add a non-financial livestock event to our actuals?
So, for example, if you were looking at your mixed age cows and realised that you hadn't put a death in, you simply click into the mixed age cows tab, drop it down and come along to deaths. And say, for example, we had some in November, click in here and add, and you just simply put in quantity and save.
Great, thank you. Your purchase and sale should already be recorded. Always add the quantities for purchases and sales, as this gives you rich reports, and you can add weights for benchmarking, but this is less important for dairy. Now, your closing stock tallies will age up and become your opening tallies for next year. Now, the aging process seems to trick a lot of us up, but it's an industry standard. All you have to remember is that stock age up on the last day of the financial year. So you've got calves, 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 and then the last day of the financial year, the 31st of May, at midnight, they age up to rising 1-year-olds. And they start the next financial year as a rising 1-year-old.
Just as a note here, if you click into a stock class, you can see where it ages to, just by the way it's highlighted.
And now a good rule of thumb is when you code livestock events, ask yourself the age they were at the beginning of the financial year and code accordingly. Now, we recommend that you adopt the KISS principle for a stock rec. So that's keep it simple, silly or stupid. Otherwise, your stock rec can get too complicated. I personally wouldn't recommend you have a stock code for empties. After all, your empties are generally mixed age cows, and if you want to record that level of detail, record it in the notes or the description. From an accountant's perspective, having an accurate livestock reconciliation prepared in Farm Focus makes their lives a lot easier. It is much better for the farmer to be calculating his or her deaths and missings than someone else in the office, in the accountant's office doing it. Stock numbers also impact on your tax, so it's important to have the numbers correct. And banks also use stock reconciliations when looking at performance, so it's important to get it right. So now we're confident that the stock rec is right. What other information does my accountant need to complete my draft set of accounts? Capital expenditure. Your accountant will want to have a copy of all your invoices for all your capital expenditure over $500. If you've used your invoice scanner, they should already be attached. If not, use the drag and drop function to attach them. Bank statements. All accountants are different, but as a minimum, they all want a copy of your bank statement, which includes the last day of your financial year. I suggest you attach it to the last transaction of the financial year, and therefore you don't have to provide a paper copy. Asset register. At the end of the financial year, check you've entered new assets in your asset register. This can be found under Settings, Asset Register. This asset register is fairly basic, as it doesn't consider depreciation, but it is worth registering all new assets purchased and sold in the following year and slowly building up your asset register. Okay, some quick other tips and tricks. In an ideal world, you would have invoices attached to the majority of your bank transactions. Gone are the days of boxes of invoices being dropped off at your accountant's office, as all invoices are now saved on Farm Focus, and there is no issue anymore with storing 7 years of farm invoices in your garage because everything is online. Now, if you haven't attached your invoices by using connectors or invoice scanner or uploading CSV files, maybe you can make that a goal for yourself next year, as it makes life for you and your accountant so much easier. Now, you can attach as many PDFs and JPEGs as you like to a transaction. I attach additional information such as lease agreements, sale purchase agreements, hire purchase agreements, and any other legal documents. It's really good for insurance claims too, as I can attach this insurance claim, but I can also attach photos to show the damage relating to my claim. And just as a side, I also write a few bullet points about the season just gone, like if it's been wet, or we've got a new farm worker or a new share milker, or we've had an adverse weather event. And then I attach that document to my last day of the financial year. And that way, when I look back in years to come, it will jog my memory and can explain anything unusual about my accounts for that year. For example, this year, it's been really wet where we are, and we've hardly had our irrigator on. So our power bills are extremely low compared to normal. Now, another bonus is that it's easy to search for invoices in years to come. If you want to look up how much something cost you last year, you can use the search function under the completed screen. And Abby's already demonstrated that, but there it is there. So simply just search for an invoice, and you can look at different years as well. On the left-hand side, it tells us that we're in the 22-23 year, but it will have all your other years of data there as well.
So Jane, just to reiterate what you've said today, just in regard to the invoice date and the event date are what decides what financial year a transaction sits in. It's really important to get your stock rec up to date. Make sure you've got your attachments attached and any other information that you can to make life a lot easier for your accountant.
So once you've completed all these steps, and you know all your invoices from last financial year are imported and coded in Farm Focus, you can simply drop your accountant an email and let them know your books are ready to be processed. Now, if you follow these steps, it should be a simple process for your accountant to upload your accounts into their general ledger so they can work their magic.
So Esther's asked, how do you age autumn-born animals? They do still have to age at the end of the financial year. So even if they are born in autumn, they still age up at the end of the financial year. So they're, yes, they're born in autumn, but they do get to age up. They're very young when they become 1-year-olds, so they become rising 1-year-olds.
And some people actually do have a separate stock class for the autumn calvers, given that they're so much younger than if they're all spring calvers, assuming you're doing split calving. Remember, guys, if you need further support, we have a help centre within Farm Focus full of resources, along with a fantastic customer success team who are at the end of the phone. Now, our customer success team are Kiwis, and they use Farm Focus within their own farming business, so they'll understand you 100%.
Thanks, guys. Best of luck with the end of financial year, and here's to a great season next season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.